And welcome back to Contemporary Black Voices, where today we are talking about the water question related to the California fires. Chris, you say you want to talk about the colors of the hydrants a little bit more?
Yeah, I got two things. Number one, first of all, I do want to give you kudos. When we talked offline, I had no idea about the color coding system of the fire hydrants. The first thing I'd like to say is that I'm hoping that this color coding is a universal code. Because if you got a well, let's just take, for example, these fires that are raging in California now. If you've got a guy who's coming from Cleveland or coming from San Antonio who's a firefighter and he arrives in Los Angeles to fight the fires and he looks at a fire hydrant and it's one color and he's thinking that that one color has so much pressure only to find out that it doesn't have that pressure and it's not. To me, that seems to be a problem, and they need to get that straightened out.
So it needs to be a national.
It needs to be definitely national and probably international, because you're having these things that happen. I think they got people coming from overseas to help fight these fires in California. The next thing is that when Caleb talked about you probably have the most pressure in the downtown areas, I guess because of the high-rise buildings, different things like that. My thought would be is that we're living in a technology-driven age where hopefully, it might not have happened prior to this, but we definitely need to figure out that if there is a main fire like that and we have devastation that can occur to a lot of neighborhoods, that they might be able to change either the pressure or something like that to different areas. The standard pressure would be what the color coding is. But if you needed more pressure in the neighborhood, because there ain't no high rises where those neighborhoods burnt down, but there was a lot of people. So there's probably more people in those areas than there were in the high rises downtown. Mm-hmm. So they needed the pressure as opposed to it being downtown. Those are my only 2 points.
Okay. So this next question, let me put my glasses on, sorry.
Put your speakers on.
Should the wealthy be allowed to have a large percentage of water rights, and at what point should the eminent domain be declared in an emergency? So I saw this story, these conversations related to this story on TikTok, and so I also went to Forbes magazine to see if there was any type of validity to what I was hearing on TikTok. But a lot of folks on TikTok were pretty consistent on what Forbes was saying. So let me just go ahead and put some context on it. You might have purchased Halo Mandarin oranges, Palm Wonderful, and Fiji water. From almonds and oranges in California's Central Valley to grapefruit in South Texas, Stuart and Linda Resnick owe their billions to nature's bounties. Based on an article in Forbes, as the West Coast mega drought worsens, one farming company has been scrutinized for its outsized role in the arid region's water supply. Stuart and Linda Resnick can buy up huge amounts of water whenever it needs more. Most of the Resnick's water comes from long-term contracts and other water from land rights they have from the farms they own. Around 9% of the total water used by Wonderful is bought out on the open water market. So this water is stored in the Kern Water Bank, the most valuable water resource in the region, critical to America's fresh food supply. The water bank, which is a public-private partnership in which the Resnicks own a 57% stake, is a 32 square mile recharge basin, which looks like floodlands from the street that essentially stores up to 1.5 million acre feet of water, or 500 billion gallons of water underground. So here is the controversy. They have been banking water by using public and private dollars to corral a public resource. Because of their water rights and their wealth, they are insulating themselves from the drought, says Char Miller, the director of environmental analysis at Pomona college. Private capital has no problem with the drought, while the rest of us do. That's one of the deep social divides. So, this is unparalleled injustice favoring the dominant wealthy while disempowering communities. Thoughts? Thoughts?
So, no. And again, I know it's a very, very serious topic, and I extend my sympathies to everyone who was lost. I think it was up to 27. Loss of life about 27. I know it was like 40,000 acres burned, 12,000 structures, or over 12,000 structures. And again, my sympathies for everyone's losses. But there's a lot of misconception on water and water rights and drawing rights and how that works. And so one of the biggest issues was the drought. Another major issue was, I think it was 114 million gallons. Santa Ynez Reservoir was empty. It was down for repairs, for maintenance. And so the loss of that 114 million gallons definitely was felt. But with that being said, it was not that private ownership that prevented water usage. They had access to that water because there are different types of rights. And so that company has drawing rights. It doesn't actually own the water, but it has drawing rights to the water. In a situation like this, where it's an emergency, everyone has access to that water in an emergency situation. A lot of those cities and counties have what they call pueblo rights, which also gives them drawing rights to that water. So it wasn't a matter of access to the water. It was just that the system was overwhelmed. Similarly to what we were talking about with hydrants. They weren't designed to all be used at the same time. And so a lot of them suffered a completely loss of pressure. They couldn't rebuild in time and replenish that pressure and replenish where they were drawing it from, the reservoirs from where they were drawing it from, because it was just too many users. It was over 40,000 acres that they were trying to extinguish. And so it wasn't the fault of private companies. If there's any private company at fault, you would have to blame the builders. And so it's California's a land of dreams, land of sunshine. Everyone's supposed to be out there, beautiful weather. But it's overbuilt. Mm-hmm. And people are building on top of each other. And they'll have a fire and they'll rebuild again in the same exact areas that were burned. They'll have a mudslide and they'll go back and rebuild on the same exact areas that they had a mudslide. And so when you talk about land management, one of the aspects of land management is just not forest clearing or forest maintenance. It's also about sustainable building. And so, you have to build sustainably. You have to build in a very conscious manner.
Okay, with that being said, we're going to put a pause on this discussion, and we're going to come right back for our final segment. See you in a minute.